Hi Shannon, how are you? Apologies that this is late. Right, let's get straight into it. So, question six. Yeah, question six. So really, here's the thing, and with question six. So question six is looking at the theory of marginal costing. So it's trying to ask a few questions, and it's first of all basically fundamentally classification. So it says that you're making a product, and we want to classify the costs involved into what we typically refer to as prime costs. Now, prime comes from the word primary, and this fundamentally means what are the direct costs. Now, direct costs are costs we can actually see in the product, first of all. So typically these would be direct materials and direct labor. We can actually see these in the product. Now, you can have overheads, right? If you like, you can have overheads that are in the factory that might even be variable. Sorry, I don't know what's wrong with my pen. So you can have variable overheads, but you see, overheads are never direct costs. So it's not about behavior, it's about the element of the cost itself, right? So primary costs are literally so if I'm making a chair, literally the wood and for example, the labor. Now, I might have electricity that might be, if you like, kind of tagged on to the machine. So literally, when I say tagged on to the machines, it literally only works when the machines are working. So in effect, it becomes a variable cost, but it's a variable overhead. So prime costs are direct costs, right? That's the first thing. So let's go to the question and do that first and deal with that that question first. So here it says that these people are making these things, and it says that you have a batch of 50,000 cans. I mean, so this is a whole batch. This is like literally one batch. So since we're talking about one batch, I mean, this is the cost. It tells us this is the cost of making a batch. So focusing on just the direct costs, the estimated prime costs, which are the direct costs of making a batch, are the 103 and the 105. So the total cost, the total direct costs of making a batch, direct materials, direct labor, 103, 105, together giving us 208,000 of making a batch. And a batch has whatever 50,000 cans in it. So it asked about what is the cost per can. It literally has asked, what is the cost of making 5,000 cans. Then the question goes on to ask, what about marginal cost? Now, let me just break that down very quickly. Now, marginal costing is the same thing as variable costing. And what are we saying? We're asking, well, what is the cost of making an extra unit of that product? Now, here's the thing. Marginal costing is really asking, if you like, is saying exclude the fixed costs, because we kind of recognize that we understand the fixed costs. For example, when I say fixed costs, let's talk about things like rent and interest and taxes. I mean, these aren't real costs of making the product. So, I mean, for us to really make decisions, and imagine, again, another good example, another way of looking at this is if you had to make a decision about making a product halfway through the year or towards the end of your cycle in the business, you won't think about the fixed costs anymore. Think of fixed costs as already being paid. I mean, let me give you a simple example just so you can really see what's going on here. Imagine, right, it cost you £5 to put together a portion of chips, and you sold each of these portions for £10. That's the real cost of making the portion of chips, right? The potatoes and the oil or whatever that goes into it, and you sell it for 10. Now you have to pay rent of £5,000 per week, right? No one is denying that this cost does not exist, but what we're really saying is, well, I mean, we should really be saying, well, I'm really making a contribution of £5 on each portion, and I know that once I sell 1,000 portions, I've covered my fixed costs. Now here's the thing, if you sell 1,000 portions on Monday, you've covered your fixed costs. So the question here is that the only cost that matters after Monday is just the cost of making a portion of chips, which is £5. So it's really important to kind of classify clearly the difference between, if you like, the actual portion of chips. Now, the £5, when we talk about the potatoes and the oil, I mean, these are variable costs. These are costs that increase with output, right? Whether I make 1,000 portions or 10,000 portions, I will always only pay £5,000 per week. So, when we see anything that tells us to look at marginal costing, they're really asking us, as in, what are all the costs that vary with output? Right? What are the costs that vary with output? What are the, if you like, the costs that vary with output, excluding the fixed? As you continue studying, you start to see why this is really important. So if we go back to the question, in terms of the marginal cost, we're really talking here about the material, the labor, and the variable production overheads, not the fixed overheads, just the first three, right? Because those are the direct costs, and that's the variable. It's because direct material, direct labor, and variable production are all variable costs. So marginal costing is variable costing, same idea. So direct material, direct labor, and if you like, the variable overheads. The variable overheads are 84,000. I believe this is 100, brings this to a nice 292,000. Let's look at question 3. Question 3 now says that, okay, fine, that's all well and good if you're calculating, if you're looking at it from the point of view of breaking even, for example. Now it says calculate the full absorption cost. Now, again, like I said, the full absorption cost kind of takes off this view. Absorption costing says this. Listen, I want to cover all costs. Someone comes along to you for a quote, and they say to you, oh, let's go back to my portion of chips, for example. It's going to be 5,000, right, per week. And you ask, well, if it's 5,000 every week, you ask a simple question, how many portions of chips did I make last week? This is a fixed cost. It's just, you just have to get your frame of mind, your mind into the way the thinking behind it. Someone says, oh, we made 5,000 portions last week. So you could assume that, therefore, you could argue that you really, fixed costs could be spread over the portions of chips. If you like, almost like £5,000, generate 5,000 portions of chips, generated £5,000 of fixed costs. I mean, this could have been electricity or whatever it is. If electricity was a fixed cost. So we can make this kind of assumption that we can say, well, we have 5,000 as your fixed cost, and your portions of chips last year were 5,000. So I can charge £1, if you like. I must cover, if I did exactly what I did last year, £1, I could assign £1 towards fixed costs, and I would cover my fixed costs. I'll say that again. I can assign £1 towards fixed costs, and I will cover it. Now, don't get me wrong. You still have direct materials, you still have direct labor, you still have variable overheads. Those might have been £3 a portion, £2 a portion, and whatever, £1 a portion. And when you add all these together, we refer to the absorption costing. So absorption costing now says divide or spread fixed costs over the number of units and include it in your costing. So I'm going to do the question first and then kind of go back to again what this is really saying. So the full absorption cost is now saying take the material, take the labor, take the variable production, and take the full production. Now let me be clear here. What we're really dealing with here is production, right? We are dealing with production costs, because remember that you're making. Right, so we're thinking about production costs, right? So when we think about production, because that's the issue here, we're thinking about the trading account. When I say the trading account, we don't include, if you think when you buy any product, when you buy goods, you literally just buy them and you put them in cost of sales. And then later on we talk about admin, under expenses, right? Under expenses we have admin. So we're really talking about, when we talk about absorption costing, we're talking about just production, because we just want to make the product. We just want to find out what the cost is of making the product. So, which brings us nicely to now say, well, we batch labor per batch, variable production overheads, and fixed production overheads. We don't include the admin, selling, and distribution in our in our analysis. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add, once my computer settles, I'm going to add the 103 to the 105 to the 84 to the 34 to come to an answer. So let's just go back here. So I have 105, 103, 84, and 84 and 34, 34, and adding all this together gives us 326. And so I've literally taken into account the fixed overheads. So now let's the fixed overhead production. So let's just kind of grow this again. We're saying that you start off with direct, literally direct. So direct costs are, if you like, directly related to the product. So that's it. Now we can add on any variable overheads, and now then suddenly I could production. This is all production anyway, fixed production costs, and now suddenly I'm talking about the full cost. So you can see it grows to full cost. And for it to go from prime to marginal, I include the variable overheads, because marginal is to do with all the variable costs, because prime costs are variable costs as well, you see. Yes. And then really it's left for me to divide. It's left for me to now find these costs per unit, I think, which is what this question is asking in E. It's literally saying to us that this is all a bit. It's saying to us that we should, one second, I don't know, it's all very jumpy today. Here we are. So we have C. Here we are. C. One second. Let's just get down to that. It's okay. Right, very temperamental. One second. It should move soon. Let's just leave it. It'll move very soon. Yes, and then what we do is we divide it to find. We can now find what these costs are per can. So if I now divide these costs by 50,000, I can find out what the cost is. Well, here we are, finally. So it says calculate the estimated marginal cost per can. So I can divide that, of course. I can divide the in terms of the marginal cost, I literally just take those costs that I've just done, which of course are the marginal costs, which are 105 plus 103 plus 84 divided by 50,000. And when it comes to absorption, I can just add 105 plus 103 plus 84 plus 34 divided by 50,000, and you will arrive at the answer. So yes, so that's the video for 1.6, and I'll record 1.7 after this. Okay, great stuff.